in either the vaccine or the placebo group. The report that Moderna gave to the FDA on December 17, 2020, on its trial, specifically said it considered death, quote, a secondary endpoint, close quote, and added that, quote, there were no deaths due to COVID-19 at the time of the interim analysis to enable an assessment of vaccine efficacy against death due to COVID-19, close quote. By publication date, one person had died in the placebo group. Go over that again. In the study period for the 2 new mRNA vaccines, only one person out of 70,000 died a COVID death. Now, ask yourself, without knowing the demographic markers of the trial participants, but knowing for a fact that hundreds of thousands of people were dying from the virus, does this seem to you like an appropriate way to study severe illness? Moderna told the British Medical Journal in August 2020, quote, you would need a trial that is either 5 or 10 times larger, or you'd need a trial that is 5 to 10 times longer to collect those events, close quote. In a talk based on her Lancet article given to the British Medical Journal's COVID-19 Known Unknowns Vaccines webinar in February 2021, Dr. Suzanne Hodgson, National Institute for Health Research academic lecturer in infectious diseases at the University of Oxford, stated, quote, the current RCTs, randomized control trials, that are ongoing are not powered to assess efficacy against hospital admission and death, close quote. In the same seminar, Doshi presented on the transparency issue. Having read the protocols and then the phase 3 trial studies of the Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Sputnik Russian vaccines, he wanted to check the raw data from the studies in order to verify it. That is, he wanted to see not just the final charts, tables, averages, percentages, and conclusions, but to look over the individual cases. Most of the studies had a line in them that claimed such data was available upon request. According to Doshi, he wrote to the drug companies that had authored the studies and asked to see it, but he wasn't permitted. Quote, each time a trial is published, there is this data sharing statement and everything sounds good until you read the fine print, close quote, he said. Quote, Pfizer, for example, says that it is sharing data upon request. I asked. The same for Moderna. The same for Oxford AstraZeneca and the Russian vaccine. They all said they will be sharing the data, just not yet. And most are tying the data release to the end of the trials. So we have a situation where the vaccines are being administered to the masses, but the data isn't being shared because the sponsors say the trials are ongoing, close quote. Pfizer data, he learned, might arrive in January 2025. Moderna said it may be available once the trial is complete, sometime in 2022. Other companies were similarly vague. To date, approximately 4 billion people have already got these vaccines, many receiving a first-of-its-kind mRNA genetic formulation without outside sources reviewing the raw study data. Given that the companies won't release this data in a timely manner, it is reasonable to assume that public health officials in different countries that approve the vaccines have not seen the raw data either, or run verification checks. Given all this, it is difficult to assuage those who distrust the systems that delivered the vaccines. At least one of these vaccines, the Moderna, was supported by the NIH and NIAID, which may have joint ownership in intellectual property that undergirds the vaccine. That means their budgets stand to benefit from sales, and individual government employees may get royalties for them. Though it would fall to the FDA to officially approve the vaccines, the advice to enact vaccine mandates would come from a small network and would be based on studies that were authored, in some instances, by people who are employees of the companies themselves and which were testing their own products. And when a remarkably trusting public and a few scientists requested to look at the raw data, they got stiffed. One can only imagine how enriched our knowledge would be if it were otherwise. If, to take just one example, the raw data were available and verified by the hive mind of world scientists who, drilling down, could see for whom the vaccine was most effective and who was most at risk of serious side effects, in order to follow them longer than 2 months and to protect those groups of people in the future. The confidence this would have inspired in a vaccine produced so quickly might have been astonishing, a miracle not only of human scientific advancement, but of the human capacity for persuasive communication and the social progress it can generate. Alas, that's not what we got. The train was already barreling out of the station. When the first vaccines were rolled out in December 2020, Fauci received his Moderna shot, announcing that he wanted to get publicly vaccinated as a symbol, quote, for everyone in the country. Quote, I feel extreme confidence in the safety and the efficacy of this vaccine, close quote, he said. As to the question of how sick the patients in the study were, he said, with regard to Pfizer, it was 95% efficacious not only against disease that is just clinically recognizable, but severe disease, close quote. And he said much the same was found for the Moderna vaccine. It prevents severe disease. By the spring of 2020, the master narrative, the necessity of using one main tool, the vaccine, to vanquish the enemy, was working brilliantly. Government data from Israel and the UK showed that the vaccines weren't just efficacious in clinical trials, but also effective in the real world. An April 28th article in the Harvard Gazette was titled, Vaccines Can Get Us to Herd Immunity Despite the Variants. Dr. Ugar Sahin, the chief executive of BioNTech, which developed the mRNA vaccine for Pfizer, was quoted saying that Europe would reach herd immunity in July or August. The virus would no longer be able to spread. In the UK, Freedom Day was set for June 21st, later changed to July 19th, and the return to normal in other vaccinated countries seemed not far behind. On April 22nd, Israel, considered the world's most vaccinated country, except for some tinier nations, for the first time recorded no daily COVID deaths. Pfizer's CEO, who called Israel, quote, the world's lab, close quote,